Guys, welcome back to another episode, and for today's episode, it's going to be a spicy one because Lou and I are going to be going through some of the worst album reviews that we've ever seen from The Guardian, Pitchfork, and much more. But guys, if you want to stay up to date with all of our album reviews at NFR Podcast, smash the notification bell and subscribe if you have not already. And guys, let me know in the comments section, what's NFR's worst review? I want to see what you guys have to say about that. But listen, let's get into this, all right? Because as music reviewers, I still go back and I go look at the entire web for not only other people's music opinions, but just to see where they got it right and where they got it wrong. So what is the list going to compile for today?
It's going to compile of a lot of albums such as Utopia, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. We have The Big Day in here. So sometimes you could say that these journalists were maybe overly enthusiastic about these albums, or maybe they downplayed the actual quality of these projects. But let's get started with Utopia by Travis Scott, a review done by The Guardian. They gave it 2.5 stars. Sorry, 2 out of 5 stars, even worse, which is a score of 40 out of 100. And this was written by Shad D'Souza. And automatically with that kind of score, you could see that this review is not going to go into the best of the places. But
well, that's the thing, though, is that sometimes you look at the score at face value and, there's really good explanations for the scores. But in this one, it just felt like, especially when you look at the writing of the album and the explanation for the writing, some things were missing.
Yeah.
So this was what was said. There are moments on Utopia where he addresses the disaster. The things I created became the most weighted in a sharp line on my eyes. But he mostly continues his previous lyrical mode, a vision quest through sensory pleasures where he's always just out of your grasp. And I just don't understand what that means, like sensory pleasures being out of my grasp. I mean, when you go into something like example for a schizo, like I'm perfectly in tune with that track. I'm engaged. It's high voltage. I'm there, So, and to say that the writing is not necessarily diverse, actually, there was a statistic done by Hip Hop by the Numbers that this was his most rap-centric album out of his entire discography. So I don't agree with that. And yes, even if you go look at something like My Eyes, it is one of the best songs conceptually, but there's other value on this album.
And I also feel like just, what I'm reading from this writer, it almost seems like he wanted Travis to rap about a specific topic, in this case, the Astroworld event. But why? I mean, at the end of the day, this is not supposed to be a moment for Travis Scott to be called up to the stand in a courtroom. Like, this is art. He does not need to share any content matter that he doesn't want to share, and I feel like right there's a flaw in this review. But let's go on to another excerpt where it says, Utopia's highlights are often songs that least involve Scott, including Del Resto Echoes, a collaboration with Beyonce. Like, what the fuck?
Find Scott's fellow Houston native still inhabiting the imperious ballroom announcer posture of her 2022 album Renaissance, Scott's production adding attention and grit sometimes absent from that album. So
I'm sorry, man, but Del Resto is one of the most mediocre songs on here. One of the only mediocre songs
not only that, but if you're
builds like tension, but it never gets resolved sonically.
But it's also like saying too that Beyonce's performance on Del Resto was, let's say, close to Renaissance, so that's automatically the best part of the album. Not only that, but it often misses grit. And it's absent from the album.
No, it says he's adding attention and grit.
Sometimes
that's usually
that's absent from the album. So that's saying that there's a missing grit to the album. What are you talking about? There's Alchemist beats on this project.
Absolutely.
There's certain, even that, the cold and dark Coleman production, to say that there's no grit throughout it, or at least that it's missing, in my opinion, it doesn't stand
also,
up.
Also, some of the best songs on this album are songs where Travis Scott is either alone or taking front and center stage, looking at songs like Thank God, Hyena, My Eyes, Sirens, I Know.
Modern Jam had Tizo.
But just to say, I mean, I don't get where they're coming from with this. I mean, how can Travis Scott not carry a song on his own? But the next one is interesting. Utopia's most interesting moments arrive as it comes to a close. Parasail, a collaboration with Dave Chappelle and cult Swedish rapper Young Lean, is whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then he also wants to shout out K-pop as being one of the most interesting moments. So we're talking about the most microwave music anthem of 2023, K-pop being one of the best highlights off of Utopia. Right there, it's just, this is automatically an invalid
microwavable. Okay,
review.
listen, it was definitely a bit out of place for the track list.
But
to say that that's the highlight of the album,
you know what the intent was with K-pop. Let's bring together these superstars and make it the biggest song to ever come out.
I said that it probably would have fit better on the Bad Bunny album, if I'm being completely honest with you. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of the review, but you know what? Shout out to The Guardian. Let's keep going on with this. Let's go on to a review for My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. This was done by The Guardian as well, and they gave it a 2.5 stars, and this was done by Alex Macpherson. I hope I pronounced the name right. Excuse me if I didn't.
Yeah,
but
it's 40 out of
but, okay,
100.
40 out of
And
100.
when it comes to My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, there's always been controversial reviews. One of them being from Anthony Fantano. And by the way, we didn't include any Fantano reviews in here because we have those conversations with him on video. You guys have seen a video. If you haven't checked it out, we actually do have a video up on the channel where we go through some of his most controversial scores ever. And what's interesting is that Fantano gave this album a 6 out of 10, but Sir Alex here gave it a 4 on 10 technically. And what's interesting is that if you actually click through on this review, it's only like one paragraph. There's not much actual detail being given about the album. And the first excerpt I want to read out is this. A fascinating public persona is not synonymous with fascinating musical output. And while West's attention-seeking behavior may be grotesquely compelling, the man-child himself is not. And right away, like, there's no doubt in my mind that, you know, he's not a fan of Kanye West, the person. He's calling him a man-child. And as a critic, you've immediately lost me. There's no professionalism being attributed to the review. And how do you want me to take the review seriously if you're not going to be sharing unbiased thoughts?
Not only that, but let's say that was the argument, and you start to get into the narrative of the album. You're actually impressed at how well woven it isn't, like how well woven in it is into the actual album itself, and you know the things that Kanye's explaining through different types of songs, like example, a Gorgeous or a Dark Fantasy, a Devil in a New Dress. Like these are interesting song concepts for Kanye's catalog. So I don't feel like that holds any weight. Not only that, but the musical output. So when you talk about musical output, I mean, that could entail the writing, that could entail the features, that could entail the production. The problem is that MBDTF on all fronts is an extremely well-calculated album. Some of the best production from the 2010s, you know, instrumentals like Devil in a New Dress, a Dark Fantasy, for example, a Gorgeous, the obvious ones that I mentioned. You look at the writing, it's not like Tip of a Butterfly level in my opinion, but still there's great rapping throughout the entire album, and you have fantastic features. So to say that the musical output is lacking, I can't get invested.
Speaking of features, this was a really interesting one to me, man. A ludicrous roster of guest verses only to show off his contact book, or in this case of Nicki Minaj's stunning cameo on Monster, completely upstage him.
Well, that's right. Nicki Minaj did have a fantastic performance.
Apparently, Alex got the boss call and found out that Kanye decided to bring in indie folk artist Bon Iver and to bring in, at the time, relatively underground rapper Sci-Hi the Prince to flex who's in his contact book. Like, some of these features were people that Kanye's never worked with before that are out of the genre. How is this him just wanting to make a show out of who's on there?
Not only that, but maybe if you knew the entire production crew, everything that went into the actual engineering, like, there's a lot more than meets the eye with this feature list. Like, there was a huge cast of people that worked onto this album. So, I mean, automatically there, you've lost me. And then, do you want to go through the last one, Lou? You want to do it?
Yeah, sure. And by the way, the whole thing about, like, the features upstaging him, I mean, look at him having one of the best rapping performances of his career on Gorgeous alongside Raekwon. Like, just completely inaccurate. But yeah, the last excerpt that's interesting, this album offers beats that retread past glories and an emotional palette narrowed to a range roughly as wide as West's navel. It sounds like he's pretty much saying that some of the beats on here are copies of other beats that he's done before. I mean, yes, a lot of these productions, let's say something on Power, it does feel like sort of a summation of a bunch of other sounds he's used from his other projects, but it's always recontextualized, always brought to new life.
Not only that, but there was also a completely different cast of samples that were used for this album. And you even look at, let's say, some of the highlight productions, Mike Dean, let's say, his guitar solo on Devil in a New Dress. Like, where are you getting that within Kanye West's catalog? You know, you're not finding it on Late Reg, you're not finding it on Graduation, it's not on 808. So even at that, I don't feel like it's a good argument for the review. So we keep going on with this.
Keep on going. All right. The next one that's very interesting is a review that was done on the classic Good Kid, Mad City by Kendrick Lamar. And this was done by a publication that I feel like is maybe a bit more unknown. It's called Tiny Mixtapes, and they gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So a 70 out of 100, more of a positive review. And this was written by Jacob Dorif. And with this one, I feel like, obviously, the score isn't low, but it's still pretty ridiculous for an album like Good Kid, Mad City to give it a 7 on 10.
Calling it a good album.
Yeah, pretty much. But let's hear the first excerpt. But the album nevertheless falls short of the pedigree his storied elders have set for him and its status as an all-time classic is far from guaranteed.
It's still on the 200. It's still on the 200.
If any like journalist could ever take back their words, I feel like he would be on the top of that list because he probably regrets this so fucking much.
Yeah.
Like we all know over 10 years later
Listen
how
to
much
this
of a
next one.
classic this really is.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, Lamar's versatility sometimes gets the best of him. Backseat Freestyle, the album's lone banger.
The only banger on there, Backseat Freestyle.
It's a banger.
Forget about Mac City, guys. That doesn't exist. Throw it out
Forget
the
about
window.
Money Trees. Forget about Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe. Like, just anthems.
No, but this is the best part.
Benefits from a demonically raw-throated third verse.
Pause.
Did I just read that?
Demonically raw-throated third verse, but Hit Boy's ham beat adrenalizes Lamar beyond his better judgment from the onset.
Am I just not good enough in the like the English language to understand like what is this getting at?
Bro, who's ever said that? Yo, you know, I was really digging the beginning of Backseat Freestyle, but once he starts to raw throat the third verse, like what the fuck?
That's arguably the best verse on the song.
Who speaks like this in real life, bro? I'm sorry.
Listen, it's a review. It's journalism, so whatever the case may be.
Either way, that third verse, I love that monstrous cadence where he deepens the voice.
It's arguably the best verse on the entire song. It's crazy. It's a crazy verse. You actually get into the writing of it. Go on Genius. Go look at the third verse. But next one. Lamar himself announces the title King Kendrick at the time where we're at least compelled to listen. The old doctor logs another verse about his lucrative brand of luxury headphones, and the whole affair fizzles to a bizarre end with a knowingly cheesy voice code. Nah, bro, let's get over this. So listen, the old doctor, I mean, Kendrick Lamar is one of the most respected rappers in the game, and Dr. Dre had a huge hand in that, so I mean, the old doctor had to do something there. Not only that, but like...
There's one line in that song about beats. Out of the entire part that Dre has, the multiple verses, there's one line about beats, and he made it seem like the whole verse was about beats. Apart from that, like the fact that he claims to be the title of King Kendrick when we're least compelled to listen to him sing towards the end of the album, it's not like we had to get through 23 long songs to get to that point. Like, you're listening to a modern day masterpiece and it's the outro.
Well, not only that, but it also proves that you didn't pay attention to the chronological order of the track list, because if you're kind of tuning out at the end of the track list, well, you're not understanding the album's concept and what he's been really trying to do. So I mean, listen, Jacob, you kind of played into that one yourself. So let's keep going on to the next one. This one's crazy. This one's crazy. So this is The Big Day by Chance the Rapper. This was a review that dropped for Chance's mega studio album, one that was extremely anticipated. And the AV Club gave it 100 out of 100. And this is written by Adam Isaac Itkov. I hope I pronounced the name right.
A 10 on 10 for The Big Day.
A 10 on 10. It's an uncompromisingly individualistic effort that further cements Chance's meteoric ascent from Chicago Southside rapper to global superstar.
This album did not contribute to Chance being a global superstar. He literally canceled the Big Day tour. The album didn't go gold. There's no hit songs on the album besides maybe Hot Shower, which became popular because it became a meme song. So this has really aged back. If anything, this was a major career setback for Chance the Rapper, if you really think about it.
Well, he had won the Grammy for Coloring Book, and it was an iconic moment. Yeah. You could say that was probably like the biggest thing that lifted him off into another realm. So even at that, I think that you're looking at the wrong album. And it's just, this is crazy. But listen, at least he's praising Eternal. I like Eternal.
Yeah, this album hops from I can't pronounce that word. Cylinder bright gospel tracks like Eternal to the bass-laden Hot Shower, the album's first trunk rattler where Chance coasts across stretched out syllables alongside the baby and Made in Tokyo. So apparently Hot Shower was one of those highlights off of the album that was worth praise.
It's gonna rattle your trunk. It's gonna rattle your trunk.
This is probably the craziest statement. Other highlights, of which there were many, are closer to the mainstream, like Francis and the Lights and Justin Vernon's contributions to The Big Day, Timbaland's brooding beat of Big Fish, which comes with the iciest Gucci Mane verse in recent memory. This one had me cracking up just reading about it. I mean, it's horrible.
Where are we going with the feature list? The feature list was arguably so out of place for this album.
Miscalculated.
And not only that, but there was not only a huge misdirection with the feature list. It's like, okay, well, if you want to get all these big stars and people that are relevant for the industry, that's fine, but they have to be able to play on Chance the Rapper style. And like, what's Gucci Mane going to be doing on a Chance the Rapper album. You know,
Yeah.
what is he going to be able to contribute here? You know,
Yeah, not much, honestly. I do like the line where he's like, Chance the Rapper, Guwop the Trapper. Like, his delivery there is sick. But no, the verse itself is nothing memorable. But the closing statement was this: the big day is a watershed moment, not just because Chance has so adeptly turned an industry on its head, but because it's the zenith of an entire career spent demonstrating that when Chance raps, he raps from the heart. And here's the kicker. Maybe that's why when we get to know Chance the Rapper, it feels a lot like we're getting to know ourselves. Like, bro, just tell me you related to the album and that's why you gave it 100 out of 100. Like, you know what I mean? How is you relating to this album going to make it a perfect album?
people are going to think we can't read, by the way, after this episode.
We're trying to kind of get through the excerpts quickly. That's another thing, too.
Well, not only that, but there's a lot of words in these reviews that I get it, you know, if you want to flex the journalism and the vocabulary, but a lot of them don't even they don't read well, if you get what I'm trying to say. Like, a lot of the vocabulary that's being used, it's kind of like to overfluff the fact of well, just get to it, you know, and just let me know what the meat of this is. And that's something that I don't necessarily enjoy from these
I do have to
either.
give Pitchfork credit for that, though. Like, they always have some really well written reviews, even if the vocabulary is a bit out there and a bit
it's great,
extreme. Yeah. They're usually very well written and they flow well. But let's get on to the Forever Story by JID. Hip Hop DX review. Gave it a 3.2 out of 5 stars, which is a 64 out of 100. And this was written by David Aaron Brake. And I don't know if you remember this, but there was a whole moment where Jid actually called out the writer, and there was a bit of controversy surrounding the review. But let's get started with the first excerpt. So the album format has never been Jid's specialty. Both the Never Story and DiCaprio 2 paled in comparison to some of their breakout songs. The same is true on the Atlanta's Rapper's latest. So apparently Jid has a weak catalog.
Yeah, apparently has a weak catalog. One of the coolest catalogs that's being built in hip-hop right now.
Listen,
I have no idea
he's
where
someone
that
that literally puts intention behind every verse, always makes sure to give you a cohesive listen, always incorporates hosts or skits. That side of his craft is something he always puts so much care into. So I don't know where that's coming from.
Arguably also one of the best writers in modern hip-hop right now when it comes to storytelling concepts and even his punchlines. So I have no idea where that's coming from. And also think about the cast of producers that he has access to coming together for this type of album. You know, it's not mumbo jumbo. So I have no idea why that was targeted at his catalog. He trades the playfulness, quotable lines, and singularity for a tamped-down project which feels like a Dreamville template not unique to JID. Listen, David, name me another album in the Dreamville catalog that sounds like this one.
There's not a single one.
There's not a single one.
I mean,
Baz is not going to be able to replicate that. I never got an album like that from Cause. J. Cole doesn't have an album like The Forever Story. I'm not saying on the same level. I'm saying stylistically, just what he was able to bring to the table. So to be able to say that this is a copy-paste Dreamville format, what is even a copy-paste Dreamville format? They're one of the most unique camps out there, and each and every single artist sound different in their own unique ways when it comes to tonality and writing.
And
so
also,
makes no sense.
How do we trade out quotable lines when you have stuff like "I'm a rant when I talk to Ja," or when you have stuff like "You better be Beyonce if you say my name"? Just so many quotables. Not only that, but how is there no singularity? You have a conscious rap album that has beat switches on almost every song. You have Jid's life story, which of course that's singularity to him. And what about the 1 million different new flows he tried out on the album?
Or the singing performance on Cody Blue to be able to push his artistry. So that's what I'm trying to say, is that that's not valid.
This is one of the craziest ones. Jid raps like a Harlem Globetrotter on the Forever Story. The skills are there. It's littered with flashy displays of technique, and it sounds better than fine most of the time, but there's nothing on the line at the end of the day. It doesn't matter who wins the game. So apparently there were no stakes, and Jid wasn't rapping while performing brain surgery in an operating room. So for that reason, there was no high stakes, apparently, because what is this, an NBA Finals match? I don't know what stakes we're talking about. And if you actually want to talk about the stakes within his career, there were high stakes. This was his first album in 4 years. There was one of his biggest ever lead singles attached to this being surround sound. There was pressure to deliver, and he fucking delivered.
Oh, he absolutely delivered. And not only that, but he pushed the boundaries of his artistry on this, and he brought it to a whole different level. After this album, the whole community was hailing him like, this is going to be the future of hip-hop. So I really don't understand where that's coming from. And even at that, to say that it's all flash and dazz, you can't be going through certain songs on this album, like example, System and saying that there's no substance in that writing. That makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
So that's not a good one. Let's go on to Revival by Eminem by XXL. They gave it 80%, 80 out of 100, and this was written by Scott Glacier. So Eminem Seeks Redemption on Revival album. That was the problem with the album, is that, Eminem kind of played into everyone, and he kind of just catered the entire album by being salty at people, but also making it feel extremely plastic, in my opinion, as an Eminem fan. And this is what was said in the first paragraph. While Revival isn't the defibrillator, I'm not sure if I said that right. Defibrillator, excuse me, that Eminem needed to revive his dominance, the album has enough highlights to maintain decent replay value and enough lyrical miracles to keep mindful rap from totally flatlining. So, no way.
I mean,
There's no way
I
this is
do like the writer. I do like the fact that the writer spent time on Castle and a Rose, because those are obviously major highlights, and those were songs unlike anything from Eminem's catalog that were super deep. But yeah, besides those and like Framed and maybe Chloroseptic, that's 4 songs out of like 19. So how is there decent replay value? Yeah. Another one that was highlighted, a song that was highlighted on Untouchable, he delves into the long history of systematic racism in the United States in a manner that's more direct and thoughtful than he's ever explored. I think it was great that Eminem decided to put time and focus on serious issues, but that's not going to be an excuse for the robotic delivery you get within the song, the goofy chorus. Like,
it doesn't make it for good music.
Exactly. Good subject matter does not equal good music, so that was another part of the review I didn't enjoy too much. And then the last one, his pen game hasn't even lost half of a step, and he still possesses the neurotic edge that always made him such a driving force in hip-hop. I mean, you're getting bars like, and I started from the bottom like a snowman. Like,
no.
I'm sorry. You're getting, like, a lot of, like, on-the-nose bars where it's like, well, yes, we get it, Eminem. You could rhyme well, but you don't have to give us cringe lyricism and bars that are a bit too obvious and a bit too spelled out. And that was the beginning of getting those types of bars from Eminem's later catalog.
And even when you look at his career, for example, he has a legendary career. And to say that he brought that edge back again, it was completely missing from the entire project. At least you got some of that edge back in something like a Kamikaze that released a year later. If this album really hit the mark for the fans, I think Eminem would have never released Kamikaze to, let's say, make up for like how big of a flop it low-key was. It was, and musically,
Not
obviously, it was
commercially.
a huge downgrade for Eminem standards, and it was just a case where I feel like he didn't necessarily upgrade on anything, and 8 out of 10 is not generous. That is a completely different type of generous, if you ask me. That's like giving someone the keys to your car and saying, okay, you take it away, and I don't want to ever see it again.
At least there was no excusing the pop features. That's one thing I enjoyed within the
Yeah, but
review.
you can't excuse that. At that point, what is there to find in that sort of stuff? But
All right.
let's keep going on with this, Lou.
Yeah, next up, Pink Tape by Lil Uzi Vert. This was a review done by Clash Music. They gave it a 90 out of 100, and this was written by Robin Murray. Let's get started with the first excerpt here. Already a 90 out of 100 is totally incredible. It's really shocking to witness, but the music rushes past as an incredible velocity, idea after idea, executed perfectly and then abandoned. Lil Uzi moving on to the next. So how is there solid pacing for an album that has 26 songs and a runtime of an hour and 27 minutes?
Yeah.
How is that going to equal good
There's-
pacing?
I guess some people value pacing differently than I do. If you like those long album experiences and you want to sit there for 26 songs and call it a start to finish album, hey, I can't help you. So enjoy the album. Next one. Songs like That Fire and the Nicki aided Endless Fashion are sheer avant-garde pop music, accessible, bold, and free. This is the problem, is that you're praising one of the worst songs on the entire album, which was Endless Fashion.
Yeah.
It just... The cheap pop attempt of taking an old song and bringing it back to the new, I mean, sometimes it works. In this case, it didn't, in my opinion. And it's accessible. I mean, not really. Everybody's doing much better for Nicki at this point.
It's the worst writing and flows you'll hear in a song in the 2020s decade. So that was pretty atrocious as an opinion. But yeah, the last one here, long rumored, frequently speculated upon, only their most dogged fans would have expected such brilliance. This lengthy, thrill-a-minute release could well be their finest moment. This is not Uzi's finest moment. This is their worst album, hands down, easy, no debate.
No debate.
I think a lot of Uzi fans would be shocked at this being hailed as like their finest moment. But let's move on to Kid Cudi's Man on the Moon, a review that was done by Pitchfork. Our first Pitchfork review that we're covering here was given a 4.1 out of 10, which is incredible for one of the most influential hip-hop albums of our time. Yeah, just really, truly unbelievable as a score. But let's get into the first one here. Throughout, Cudi's issues could not be rendered in a more clumsy or obvious way, blowing up every slight perceived or real, had mad jobs and I lost damn near all of them, into trials of such mythical proportions that it needs a bogus 4-part plot. Cudi is sad, does mushrooms, starts to get famous, and is still sad. That's pretty funny. I gotta say, that's pretty funny.
The way that they broke that down.
And narration from Common.
Narration from
Yes.
Common.
Do you agree with that 4-level plot?
No, I mean it's a way to listen to the album. I get what they're saying though.
It's not entirely true though.
But it's like it's if you go, let's say, portion per portion, there's definitely a narrative to the album. That's the point of like Man on the Moon, is to be able to follow that structure. Yes, maybe it's not as deep and methodical as let's say like the chronological order of Undone, but it still aids like the listener, and they're iconic. And whenever fans talk about the album, they always talk about the chapters and where certain things place. So I definitely think it hit with the listener. As far as like narrowing this album down to Cudi is sad, does mushrooms, starts to get famous, and is still sad. I mean, you just haven't gone through the entire album at that point, and you're kind of reading all the lyrics at surface value. So I understand maybe where you're coming from if you say, well, the writing was maybe a bit too simplistic, but yet it was still relatable. But this album helps so many people, and it has such a good messaging throughout it. So you're kind of knocking the content matter, but at the end of the day, it's helped a whole generation of new music listeners. So I don't agree with that.
Absolutely. The next one. He's referred to as our hero throughout Man on the Moon, and his superpower is managing to convey unlimited amounts of sadness while staying firmly in his vocab-stunted sorrow, tomorrow, room, moon, wheelhouse of rhymes. I mean, sure, you're not getting mind-blowing fucking couplet rhymes, and these bars are not filled with triple meanings, but at the end of the day, who gives a fuck? Who's ever asked that of Kid Cudi for him to be a wordsmith by any means? At the end of the day, we want to float with the hums and melodies and hear stories about Cudi win a fucking space.
It's arguably
That's what I'm
his
there
greatest
for.
asset. Absolutely. It's arguably his greatest asset when it comes to like Kid Cudi's soundscape and his aesthetic. It's
the atmosphere,
it's
bro.
Also, yeah, it's a part of the entire production, and you see how well like those types of vocal performances and melodies have aged. Like still no one's able to replicate it within hip-hop music, and I think that it was such a great asset, not only to Man on the Moon, but his entire catalog. It's arguably a staple in Cudi's music, so automatically you just might not like Cudi's music because this is the building ground for what he does on future projects. So do you want to go into the next one, Lou? What do you think?
All right, let's go into the next one, and here we're gonna have Tyler the Creator's Flower Boy. This is gonna be the last one for today. Consequence gave it a 50 out of 100, and this was written by Kelly McClure. So the first one, if the Ladera Heights rapper really had something to say, he missed his chance. I mean, the man literally shares a huge personal revelation, on Garden Shed. Like, this is literally his most personal album to date. How could we say that he had nothing to say?
Or go to a song concept like November, for example, where he describes some of the greatest moments in his life and just kind of talking about where he made it. It makes no sense. The album's writing is so intentional and speaks so much about Tyler. You could say that this is the album stylistically that put him into a completely different atmosphere of his career. And one of the biggest parts about that is not only the production, it's the fucking writing.
Yep.
This is some of the best writing you'll ever find on a Tyler album. It is personal. It is absolutely blissful to go through all of these tracks and just get more about him. Even something like a 9/11 Mr. Lonely. How do you listen to that song concept and ask yourself, well, this is missing something. He missed his chance to say something on this track. Well, what else do you want the guy to reveal? You know, he's not going to give you his social insurance number. He's going to tell you how he is, and that's what you're going to get from the album.
And if you want to attribute that critique to something like Goblin, I'd be a bit more understanding. But it's funny you mentioned 9/11 Mr. Lonely, because one of the excerpts is fly over songs like 911 Mr. Lonely, which can't even be saved by a Frank Ocean verse. How? What world are we living in here?
We're talking about a top 10 Tyler the Creator song.
Bro,
Easy.
the soulful bass, the sunny and joyful chords, like
the
Tyler
switches
did
in
a
the
great job.
productions. No, the switches in the content matter. No way. Did you even listen to the song if you're saying 9/11 Mr. Lonely is a flyover song? My goodness.
Also, the last one, as for the actual music involved in the release of Flower Boy, it's fine. It's more of the same. It seems to be needing something more, an extra spark of interest. Like, I'm sorry, but this woman is talking in code here. More of the same, needs something more, an extra spark of interest. Like, you have to elaborate if you're going to be giving out a review.
Not only that, but to say that it's more of the same, compare this album to a Cherry Bomb. The artistic progression is so far, and as like the gap was just created on a completely different level to bring Tyler to a whole different level of artistry.
Yeah, if you've ever listened to his music, you know this was a huge departure from his previous sound. So this was one of the worst ones that we came across today, guys. But let us know, what was the worst review out of all of these? And like I asked you guys at the beginning, what's our worst album review of all time? And if you guys enjoyed this, let us know if we should bring it back and which reviews we should cover. Thank you guys so much for watching this video all the way up till the end. We'll see you soon. Peace.